topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in this week. Great to have you. This show has been brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. If we have not met before and you don't know me, I'm an organizational psychologist and logotherapist, speaker, and author. My team and I at Gusto now help companies to enliven and fortify their operations by building a culture and leadership activated by meaning and purpose. Our mission is to help our clients create a destination workplace where people flock to join, are intrinsically motivated to perform at their best, can grow to their fuller potential, and are committed to stay and dynamically deliver on the company's mission, which all translates to higher profits for you. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at gusto-now.com or my personal site, elisecortez.com. Now, getting into today's program, we have with us today James W. Keyes, a global business leader, philanthropist, educator, artist, musician, commercial-rated pilot, and modern Renaissance man. He is the former CEO of two internationally recognized Fortune 500 companies, 7-Eleven and Blockbuster. He's had a lifelong commitment to education, serving as a founding director of the Dallas Education Foundation, and is the founder of the Education is Freedom Foundation. He's the author of Education is Freedom. The Future is in Your Hands, which we'll be talking about today. He joins us today from my city, our city, Dallas. Jim, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
So it is a mild understatement to say that I loved your book.
Thank you.
Every single last word of it, and I do read my guests' books cover to cover. Yours was just so inspiring and encouraging. Really, really appreciate being able to share it with my listeners and viewers and champion your message, Jim.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I am, it's my first journalistic adventure, so it means a lot to me.
Wow, really? That's your first one out of the gate? Okay, that's it. I'm hanging up now. That's it. I'm too envious.
Yeah, I've had some good coaches and some very good mentors along this journey, but yeah, very first ones.
Clearly. Well, I love what you state as the objective is to inspire us all to learn and to keep learning, because wisdom, which is a higher degree of knowledge, you say, is the lifeblood of a civil society and the oxygen that fuels our personal enlightenment. I love that you're really championing a unitive effort among all of us. I just find that so hopeful and as a course of action, and I definitely want to be part of that. So I'm in, Jim. You got one.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, I'll share a quick story with you. When I first wrote the book, the publisher, of course, is working on the title, and I knew what the title was going to be. I'll share that story with you down the road. But the hardest part was the subtitle.
I understand. Yes.
It's really hard. And so they kept asking me what I wanted. And I said, well, I really want it to say that this book is a self-help guide for humanity. And they said, who do you think you are? You know, you can't say that. I mean, it's like, that's way too overreaching. But it's so true in so many ways that what it comes down to is knowledge and wisdom to take away fear and anger and hatred and all that stuff. And truly it is something that we can all do if we believe in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really, really subscribe to this whole notion. You say, therefore our collective desire for the greater good becomes the bright light that will take away our fear, as you said. We can replace ignorance with knowledge. We can replace despair with hope. We can replace fear with understanding, and we can replace aggression with peace. That sounds really good right about now, Jim.
Boy, doesn't it? And, when I wrote the book, we were in a time of polarization, and I as I began to research the book and knowledge and problems throughout history, I struggled with this issue of how do I, and especially how do really intelligent people, really intelligent societies put themselves in a situation where they're in this cycle of fear and hatred. It makes no sense. You would think that the more knowledgeable a society becomes, the more peace you would have, one would think. And interestingly, I stumbled on this thing that I put in the book called militant ignorance.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'd never heard that before until I read it in your book.
Yeah, it was fascinating because I was really struggling with how do I explain this? How do I explain the irrational behaviors? And M. Scott Peck, in a book called The Road Less Traveled, talked about this. Yeah, talked about this idea of militant ignorance. And basically what it is that, it's that natural human, almost tribal behavior that, after all, we are human and we do fall back into what I call later in the book, our caveman brain kicks in.
Mm-hmm.
And we become convinced by those around us that something is true or something is correct, even if it goes against all of our values, all of our knowledge, and we literally choose not to continue learning in that environment. We shut it down and say, I'm going to go with the group. I'm going to go with the tribe. And that leads that idea of militant ignorance, like, no, I'm not going to learn.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get the facts because this is what I believe and this is what I want to believe. And all my friends believe the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It can lead to some pretty frightening outcomes.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because I'm a researcher at heart. I have about 28 pages of typewritten notes from your book because that's what I do. And that one of the things that I ascribed when you were talking about militant ignorance was many of the challenges society faces today can be traced to our individual and collective refusal to learn.
Yes. I mean, think about some of these issues that have plagued just our country. And if you put a group of intelligent people in a room, many of these issues could get solved, and yet they don't. And yet, not only could they get solved, but we almost weaponize these issues and get people so worked up and so angry about them that people choose not to seek knowledge and truth about these issues. They're so hunkered down on the idea that we're right and they're wrong, that it leads to basically an impasse. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that there will be no solution to that.
Yeah. I was just listening to the news this morning and they were just talking about how, anger sells, and it was it was very disheartening to hear that, peace and, encouragement and compassion and love don't actually sell, but anger does. And I'm like, oh, I'm in the wrong business.
Sadly, it's a motivator. But, interestingly, if you look through history, I've learned a lot in the course of writing this book. And if you look through history and you think about our leaders, the leaders that have historically, now there have been exceptions to this, but most of the leaders who have prevailed in national, political, presidential elections, most of them have been purveyors of hope.
Yes.
And those who are stoking fear generally don't prevail in the long term, because hope, I do think that hope ultimately prevails over fear. But fear is easier. It's the lowest common denominator.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, if you're going to pull out your deck of tools to how to motivate people to take action, you pull out that fear tool, and it's a lot easier than the hope tool in the short term.
I agree. I'm aligned with you. Let's reach higher. We can do better than that. But speaking of history, Jim, I want to talk a little bit about yours, because I have to say, when I was reading your book and I started reading about the story you say at the beginning, which was pretty compelling and interesting, and then come to find out that story is about you. I was like, wow, no wonder this. So it's important that our listeners and viewers know a little bit more about your history, like I do now, because if they understand that, they will understand even more deeply the power of your message and what you've written in the book. So will you just kind of give us a sketch of your earlier life?
Sure. I was really, I set it up that way in the third person because I was really reluctant I didn't want this book to be about me. I didn't want it to be a memoir, because I'm not old enough for a memoir.
Let's start with that.
Yeah, let's start there. No, I really wanted the audience to be engaged, the reader to be engaged in a story about an individual that could have been any kid growing up anywhere in the world. Because my story isn't unique. My story is played out over and over again all over the world. Too many kids in the family, too little money, problems, marital issues. My mom left at 5. My father passed away when I was 12. We had no running water. The house was condemned. I mean, I can go on and on with the list of all these adversities that I faced. And yet I'm not alone. The whole world is full of people with those kinds of challenges. In fact, we all have adversity of some sort. So my objective in the book was to share my adversity and to be able to show how I turned adversity into opportunity, and to say, look, you don't have to. I don't want that for anybody. But take your own adversity, because everybody has one. Everybody has an issue. Take that and turn it into a positive. Learn from it and make it your strength. Make it your superpower. And that was my objective in telling my own story in that fashion. And then coming up with the reveal that, yes, this was me.
Which was delightful, by the way. Thank you for that. I was delighted by that. And then, I do really want to celebrate you, Jim. I mean, you really are a living billboard of having achieved and still achieving the American dream. I mean, you have been a well-known CEO of 2 remarkable organizations. You're a philanthropist, you're a pilot, an artist, a musician, among many other notable achievements. And so it's what I love about that too, as a fellow person who believes very much in lifelong learning. You wouldn't be doing all of those things if you hadn't embraced this notion of lifelong learning.
That's exactly right. And I've dedicated a whole chapter in the book to curiosity, as you know.
I love it. We're going to talk about that.
It's the root. It's the root of all of all knowledge. And to me, there's really no difference from me than anybody else. I'm not any smarter. I'm not any more blah, blah, blah. I just never lost that curiosity that I had as a kid. And I've nurtured it. I intentionally tried to stay curious. Mm-hmm. And that curiosity still drives me today. I just want to keep learning. I'm fascinated by, like right now, we're doing social media, and I knew nothing about social media. I'd never been on a podcast months ago. And now I've learned, and I'm fascinated by it. And I'm using this tool to reach people where, especially young people, where they live, which is in social media world. Yeah. And it's a beautiful thing. So it's all about just lifelong learning is lifelong living. It's about the more you learn, the more rich your life can be.
Completely agree, which is why you still find me 9.5 years still hosting this podcast, because it's a learning platform for me that a few people happen to listen to as well. It's kind of fun. Okay, well let's dive in. I love what you've created, and especially from your vantage point of what you've done in your life. You call it the C-suite of learning here, and this is how your book is organized so beautifully too, Jim. It just all hangs together so beautifully. But listeners and viewers, the C-suite of learning, for our purposes, what Jim has created, we're gonna talk about change, confidence, clarity, critical thinking, curiosity, creativity, collaboration, cultural literacy, and character. They're all part of us, and they are essential to enhance our democratic process, as Jim says. So if we start with the first one, the change here, and you are a master at change. I loved your stories of how you navigated change through your career, and as life sort of things up to you. And I also love that for you notice, as you said it before, change equals opportunity. In other words, you can be the CEO of your life through change.
Exactly. And I didn't, of course, as a kid, I didn't realize I was doing this. I didn't know early in my career how important my ability to embrace change was as a point of differentiation versus other employees. And then one day I woke up and said, all of these things we've been through, that I've been through personally, contributed, I think, to my ability in a company setting to deal with change, because I always recognized that I came to recognize, and this is what I'm trying to share in my book, that it has nothing to do with the change itself. It seems like a horrible crisis at this moment, and it could be the best opportunity of your life. You just don't know it at the time.
Right, right.
So that's why I say, in any change can be opportunity, but it's not the change that matters. It's our response to the change.
Right. Well, as a logotherapist who has been very steeped in Dr. Viktor Frankl's work, of course, one of the things that he used to champion is in between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space, we have the choice of how we're going to respond, which is empowering. And I love how you go on to say that your own freedom was created from within. You were free from the inside out. You're free in your mind, and that sense of freedom turned into a life of learning. And the life of learning turned into a life of adventure, and the foundation for this book.
It's very true. And I growing up, I didn't have an understanding of wealth because I didn't have any wealth, of course. But my father used to tell me that he wanted more for me, but he didn't want me to be rich. He never said, I want you to go out and make money.
Right.
Which so many of us get caught up in that hamster wheel, of gotta make money. That's what success is all about. And I realized from my dad, he used to tell me stories. He was in World War II and he was in Burma. He was a truck driver on the Burma Road. And he used to tell me stories about the Burmese people and how wonderful that culture was and how much he learned from the people there and how he longed for that experience. And now that he was back in the United States and out of the war, how he wished he had a job that would allow him to travel the world and continue to basically have the freedom to be with whoever he wanted to be with, wherever he wanted to be. And I sort of internalized that. And as I progressed through my life and my career, I kind of woke up one day and said, it really isn't about accumulation of wealth. That's an enabler. It's a tool. But it's really about freedom. Think about how many wildly successful or wildly wealthy friends we have that are miserable.
Oh, yeah.
You probably deal with a few of them in your practice.
Indeed. Oh, okay. So on that note, let's grab our first break and let our listeners and viewers stew a little bit on what you've just served up here as an opening. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We'll be on the air with Jim Keys. He's a global business leader, philanthropist, educator, artist, musician, commercial rated pilot, and modern Renaissance man. He's the former CEO of 2 internationally recognized Fortune 500 companies, 7-Eleven and Blockbuster. We've been talking a bit about where his book came from, and we're just getting started into unraveling the C-suite of learning. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, as I am dedicated to helping create a world where people realize their potential at work and are led by inspirational leaders that help them find and contribute their greatness. And we do business that betters the world. I continue to research and write my own books. So the last one came out in March of 2023. It's called The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And I wrote it to help leaders understand the nature of today's workforce. What do they want from you to stay and thrive? And then I offer 22 best practices to help you create that culture to provide it for them. You can learn more about my books at elisecortez.com or find them on Amazon. If you are just now joining me, my guest is Jim Keyes. He's the author of Education is Freedom. The Future is in Your Hands, which is what we've been talking about today. So before the break, we served up that we are going to be covering as many as we can of the C-suite of learning, which again is change, confidence, clarity, critical thinking, curiosity, creativity, collaboration, cultural literacy, and character. We've covered change. So now let's talk about confidence.
Yeah, that was a challenge to write the chapter on confidence. It is, it is so critical, and it is such an important part of my success because I was fearless. And everybody says, "Well, how did you move from a regular employee in the organization to all these different ranks and CFO and chief operating officer?" It was about not being afraid at the heart of it. For example, I was originally, I entered 7-Eleven, the Southland Corporation, via the sort of the financial side of the business, let's say, in the planning side, because I came in to help them with an oil company that they had acquired. And then I moved into an operating role. And then after a while, I raised my hand and said, I'd like to go back and work on the strategic piece again because I can help. And what I did is I kept moving from area to area throughout my career where I didn't have the experience. It was a stretch, but it was also an opportunity to learn. Now, how many of us get stuck in that trap? They say, well, no, I can't do that. I might have to take less money for that new job, even if you're going to learn a lot more. So yes, for some reason, I had the courage. And here's the analogy I like to use. When you're a little kid, you're in school. Teacher, I know what happens. You get a spitball in the back of the head.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
You get all these people that are criticizing you. Why are you doing that? You're making us look bad. You this and that, and they call you names. I was able to tune that out as a kid for some reason and I didn't recognize it. Took me many years to realize it was never about me. It was about them.
That's right.
Their insecurities.
That's right.
Being projected on me. And it took many years. I wish I knew that then. But that same behavior happens in the boardroom. It happens in the workplace.
Yeah.
All the time. And so confidence is critically important so that you can say, I'm not going to let the pack and their insecurities try to hold me back in my career. It's not good for me, and it's not good for the company. The company needs me out there taking chances. And so it was confidence really that propelled me in so many ways throughout my career.
Well, one of the things that I got from your confidence section, there's two pieces I wanted to talk about. One is this next piece, and then one's on humility. But I really think this is actionable for our listeners and viewers because confidence is hard for a lot of people. And so I love that you go on and you say, we all know about the golden rule, which is to treat others the way that we wish to be treated ourselves. But then you say, but in addition to the golden rule, maybe we should consider and establish a platinum rule. And you say, in other words, if you treat yourself the way you want to be treated by others, then you will indelibly hold yourself to a higher standard. This will manifest in a higher self-confidence that will in turn encourage others to believe in you. That is really, really powerful. If we can hold ourselves to that same, treat ourselves in the way that we want other people to treat us, that is a game changer, Jim. It's brilliance.
It's just so true. We all struggle with the imposter syndrome. We're human. Again, it's that stupid part of our caveman brain that kicks in. Oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not strong enough, blah, blah, blah. And it's just all noise. And so I tried to figure out a way to put it into terms that people could embrace. And it was like, well, wait a minute. Why am I treating myself in a way that I would not want others to treat me? I'm harder on myself than they are out there, and they're hot enough already, So I tried to put it in those terms. The platinum rule, I called it.
Yeah.
But why not? Why not?
I love it. No, I think it's so powerful because when I think about Jim, and part of what I'm trying to do in the world is, one, I'm always about helping to activate people to understand their meaning and their purpose, and then inspire them to make a contribution worthy of their one precious life by doing so. Imagine if we could lift society just 5%, by allowing people to take more ownership of that confidence and that they could then serve from that, the world would be a vastly different place.
Vastly different place. Yeah. But there's a trap, because this is what trips up a lot of people. When a confident person expresses their confidence, there is a risk there that others will, again, try to take their legs out because they're jealous or whatever reason. But there's also, and I've been guilty of this, I've been guilty of, or certainly called arrogant, because I am so confident. I do believe so much in myself and my ability that others sometimes perceive that as arrogance. So I struggled with that in the book. And I said, I need to help my readers understand the difference between confidence and arrogance and where that line is.
Yes.
I went back to Norman Vincent Peale. Interestingly, if you think about confidence, Donald Trump kind of comes to mind. Well, his dad used to take him to hear Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking. Well, Norman Vincent Peale was a preacher. And yes, he preached positive thinking. He preached confidence. But what I discovered, and this was new learning for me, I discovered this in reading about Norman Vincent Peale, that in equal doses, he preached humility. But it was an important, unique form of humility. It wasn't humility in the sense of, oh, I'm not that good, blah, blah, blah. No, it was not self-deprecating humility. It was humility in the sense that I am smart enough to know that I don't know everything, that I have something I can learn from every human being that I interact with. It could be the janitor, it could be the waiter, it could be the CEO in the boardroom. I can learn something from them. So as long as I hold that true in my heart, then I can be as confident as I want, and I will never project that over the line kind of arrogance, because I'll be listening to them, waiting for what I can learn from them.
Yes, that's so beautiful. I so aligned with that, Jim. It's just so beautiful. So that's how we can temper arrogance with humility so that we have that good balance. So let's go on to clarity next, because I want to get through as many as we possibly can for our listeners.
Sure.
There's so much meat to them. So clarity, gosh, that sounds really simple. We just have to be clear in what we want people to do and what we say, right? That's all.
Sounds simple. Yeah.
However, there's more.
Oh, yeah. Everyone from Da Vinci to Einstein said it's the hardest thing that a human can do is to simplify. That we have a tendency as humans to overcomplicate everything. And Einstein said it well. He said, if you can't explain something well enough that a 6-year-old can understand it, you probably don't understand it well enough yourself.
Oh.
And it's so true, really. And I can't tell you how many times clarity, simplicity kept me out of trouble. I was CFO in the Enron era of a public company.
Wow.
Sarbanes-Oxley. The very same people that were calling on Enron with offshore special purpose entity tax shelters, right? Were calling on me as the chief financial officer of a $12 billion public company saying, I can help your performance, your company's performance with this accounting scheme. And I recall vividly the reason that I didn't recommend that is I would say to them, if I can't explain this to my board, and I just did not understand it well enough to explain it to my board, then I have no business doing it. You know what their answer was? Well, you're not supposed to understand it. We're the experts. We're the tax experts.
Wow.
You're supposed to do it, accept it. And that element of simplicity, that rule that I have, probably kept me out of jail.
Yeah.
Or kept the company out of a serious financial crisis. But it works. And it's, so just to elaborate a little bit, it's not just simplification, it's clarity of both inbound communication. So listening and being able to understand what we're being told. That means breaking it down into simple terms.
Right.
And then outbound clarity, because at the end of the day, if you're leading an organization, you can't lead if they can't follow, if they can't understand what your plan is, what your strategy is. And the reality is we all find ourselves in situations where our organization is saying, oh yeah, sure, I get it. Not a clue. They didn't hear what you said.
Right.
Or they're afraid to challenge it and step up and say, I really didn't understand that.
Yeah, which is part of my work too, is helping to make that safe, that psychological safety, so important. So the clarity piece too, and then as you go on to say, being able to carefully curate the message and deliver it to the intended audience in a way that they understand, but also inspires them to want to be around it and part of the action. So of course I champion that too. Okay, so what we've been talking about then is those three were really about what to learn, those three pieces. Now we're going to move on to three pieces of how to learn. So the first one there is critical thinking. Please, could we have more of that in the world, please, Jim? Would you make that happen like yesterday?
I know. Wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice? And I'll share with you, we all learn critical thinking. For those who don't really know what we're talking about with critical thinking, think of the Socratic method that we all learned in grammar school. Who was Socrates? Well, he was the guy that asked why about everything. Why? And he got persecuted for it, blah, blah, blah. He was probing. He was delving. He wanted to understand, and he would challenge assumptions all the time. So we all knew that. But then we don't like to ask why. In fact, we probably lose the why as little kids when mom says, stop asking why.
Right, yes.
We drive our parents crazy, and then we sort of learn not to ask why. But it wasn't until I got to 7-Eleven, and here's when I really embraced critical thinking. My Japanese licensees were wildly successful. They're selling fresh sushi in 7-Elevens in Japan.
Yeah.
Restaurant quality. We're having a hard time selling a fresh hot dog. And I'm like, how does this work? How do they do so well? And I became a student of their success. And what I discovered was amazing. That they took, and it was actually inspired by Edward Deming, one of our Americans that went over there post-World War II to help reconstruction of Japan. And he taught them the basic scientific method as it applies to business. And it's just basically start with a hypothesis. From the hypothesis, take an action. After the action, measure the results, and then redo your hypothesis. Very simple. They had, in Japanese, basically simplified it to plan, see, do. Or plan, do, see. Plan, do, see. And basically, it's the idea of having an idea to start with, having a plan, but most importantly, putting that action in place. And this is the part we all forget, particularly as Americans, because we're all so busy. Measuring the results. And then when we measure the results, a lot of times we measure, and then we don't do anything about it. Right. So how do we take that result and then change our hypothesis? Right. Now, if you put that into political terms, it means, okay, we're going to try something. We're going to put a policy in place. Let's step back and see if it worked. Oh, it didn't work as well as we thought. Let's take a different position. Now, that may seem like we're flip-flopping or changing our minds. Well, not if we make that change based on data. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that change is really great. I've come to view things totally differently than I did before I did that investigative research or critical thinking. Thank goodness, right?
Exactly. And it kind of comes full cycle back to change equals opportunity, because even if I had the right hypothesis, the right program, the plan, it may have worked today, but it may not work tomorrow because something changed in the environment. I got to Blockbuster to take it to digital. I was down that path, bought a streaming video company, ready to have wild success. We doubled EBITDA, our cash flow, and dramatically improved earnings. And then all of a sudden, the financial crisis hit.
Yep.
Well, I had to pivot now from transforming the company to saving the company, to try to restructure the balance sheet. And people from the outside looking in said, "Oh, what's he doing? He changed his strategy, or he didn't know what he was doing, whatever." No, it was responding to change with information, with new information that you have at any given time.
And you also had all kinds of people too that were part of this that were weighing in on the decisions and things, including your board, et cetera. So anyway, I read all of that too. Very, very fascinating. Perhaps in another conversation, we can talk more about your Blockbuster days, because I think a lot of people really want to better understand that. But for now, let's take our next break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Jim Keyes, who has had a lifelong commitment to education, serving as a founding director of the Dallas Education Foundation and is the founder of Education is Freedom Foundation. We've been talking about his C-suite of learning. After the break, we're going to cover next on curiosity. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I am your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. I mentioned in the last break that my latest book came out in March of 23. It's called The Great Revitalization. What I did for you is I created a very simple 3-page assessment for you, and it will give you a roadmap to elevating your own organizational culture to meet the discerning needs of today's workforce. And it will tell you really how you're doing with regard to what today's workforce wants. You can find it at gusto-now.com. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Jim Keyes. He's the author of Education is Freedom. The Future is in Your Hands, which we're talking about today. So one of my favorite parts of the book, of course, which we sort of hinted at before, is part of your C-suite is curiosity. I love giving myself over wildly to my curiosity. It's gotten me into all kinds of wonderful mischief over time.
It's fun. It is fun. And that's at the heart of it. It's getting back to the fun of learning, and that's so often missing in our both our academic equation and just life.
Absolutely.
Think about how many times have we traveled. You and I both travel a lot to foreign countries. Even a little bit of understanding of the language just makes that trip so much more interesting.
And enriching, yes.
And enriching, yeah. And the response from people. My French is terrible, but when I'm there, when I do try and make the effort, it could be a waiter, it could be a taxi driver, it could be someone I'm doing business with. They're grateful for
absolutely
extra effort.
Mm-hmm. You're reaching for them, right? You're making an effort for them. That's why I love how you distinguish the curious versus the complacent.
Yeah, exactly. And, I'll give you an example. One of the things that we're hearing today is, well, what's wrong with this Generation Z? I'm doing a lot of interviews about Gen Z and, boy, aren't they a mess and blah, blah, blah. And I say, no, we're actually not. They're just different. And what they're doing is they are actually quite curious because social media has lit them up. Now, they may be spending some time looking at cat videos on TikTok, but I have a video out there talking about the what of learning, the change, confidence, clarity. It's got 40 million views, and these are young people. So
amazing.
What? They're learning. They're curious. How did the CEO of 7-Eleven and Blockbuster? How did he get there? And they're learning from these things. So that curiosity is alive and well, and I think we just need to celebrate it rather than critical of people invoking that curiosity.
Oh, I'm taking it one step further, Jim. I've created a course that actually enhances curiosity by actually teaching people to get better in touch with their transcendent emotions. So I am totally with you. I love how you also describe curiosity as intelligence at play. And also it's the lust of the mind. I embrace that. Imagine if we could turn on the curiosity inside organizations. Imagine the innovation, the problem solving, the way that they'd go about delighting customers in a different way. That's what I am out to help companies do as well.
Oh my gosh, you're right. I'll give you a great example of that. I mean, I can't tell you how many companies I dealt with at 7-Eleven. I was always looking for new products, right? So I was curious about what are products in Hong Kong that could be transformed and brought here to the United States, or in Spain, or in China, or anywhere. How can I find those things that we could bring back to the U.S.? I was told by so many consumer products companies, by the CEOs of these companies, like, Jim, it's not your job. You don't do that. You're a CEO. First of all, the consumer product companies do that. And by the way, as a CEO of a consumer products company, I would never do that. That's my people that do that. The creative people, those are the ones that develop this. Well, that curiosity helps you find new products. It helps you your customer better. Yeah. So one of my favorite examples, that little aluminum bottle you see for beer that's out there?
Yeah, I love this story in your book. Yes, tell it.
Oh yeah, it's fabulous. So I'm having trouble competing with Walmart at 7-Eleven because they're selling beer below my cost. That's Walmart. That's what they do. They're using it as a loss leader to try to bring people in the store. And that's hard when you're trying to compete with that. It's like, wait a minute, they're selling it at retail below my cost. I could send people out and buy it at Walmart cheaper than I can buy it from my Miller distributor, or whatever. So I was trying to find, how can I innovate beer? That's pretty hard. It's been around for a long time, right? Well, my customers like cold beer. And so I was in Japan one time, and I opened the mini bar, and here I pulled out this thing at probably 3 a.m, jet lag. And it was so cold I couldn't hold it. And I turned on the light, which I didn't want to do, but I had to see what this was. It was grapefruit juice in an aluminum bottle. I had never seen that package, certainly not in the United States.
Yeah.
I brought it back and I shared it with Budweiser, with Miller. I said, can I get beer in this package? And I got the, kind of the eye roll. Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course. And you know what they're thinking? That's not your job. That's not even my job. And it took 2 years, but I finally got it done. And now that package is everywhere. And it's a fabulous package for water, for beer, for soft drinks. It's great.
It's wonderful. It's so delightful. And just really quick, because I think you'll find this delightful. Why I know a little bit more about 7-Eleven is from 91 to 93, my boyfriend, that's how I ended up going to Madrid and then Rio de Janeiro, worked for Arco. And his job was to add the AM, PM convenience store line to the gas stations. That's what we were doing all over Western Europe and South America. And talk about creativity. Everybody said that's never going to work. Nobody's ever going to want those stores. But as you say in your book, you realized what you were doing at 7-Eleven is you were selling convenience.
Exactly. He was my nemesis, by the way.
Sorry. So I just thought I'd just come clean on that.
Yeah, AM, PM, they were tough competitors. Arco, and they had North Slope crude from California, out in California, all the way from Alaskan North Slope, and they would bring it down to California and sell it. Again, they were selling gasoline 10 cents cheaper than my cost. It was tough to compete with them.
Yeah, I just thought I'd better just tell you that. So in case you found it on your own,
Thanks for fessing up. Tell them congratulations.
Right. We got to start this relationship right, Jim. So, all right. Well, let's move on. Now we were talking about curiosity. Now we got to go on to the next one. That's creativity, and that's another thing that I am talk about. I'm being compelled by this curiosity to create this course for organizations, and so creativity here, enabling our inner child. You say this is intelligence at play to enable that.
Exactly. And it's another one of those things that is innate to humans, that we are creative individuals, and that as we grow up, again, it's that fear thing. At one point we may have had a piano teacher and she banged our knuckles and said, that's not good. Or we tried to sing and somebody said, oh gosh, that's terrible. And our fear kicked in and we stopped doing it. And I for some reason, I was blessed with, again, that fearlessness. I was like, I don't care if they like the way I sound. I'm going to do it anyway. And I don't care if they like my painting. And my favorite example is I like to take people to MoMA, to the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And I go, okay, look, you don't think you're an artist? Here's a box of rocks. Now, what do you think? It's somebody said a box of rocks is beautiful, and this box of rocks is now in the Museum of Modern Art. Or there's one of my favorite exhibits. There's a whole bunch of jars with hair in them, and it's like, now that is art. It is inspired by someone who had a point of view and they wanted to express themselves in a box of rocks. So what makes someone think that my expression, whether it's a painting or whether it's a sculpture or my terrible singing, why is that good or bad? So if you can get beyond that judgment,
yes,
and have the confidence to go forward, there's so much richness that can come from your pleasure in exercising that right side of your brain and just letting it loose and being creative. It truly is intelligence having fun.
Well, and I love how you distinguish that. You say if curiosity is what makes us wonder, then creativity is what helps us execute. And don't we want to do more of that also, with and through our organizations? And I also appreciate how you went on to say without the creative minds of our ancestors, we would still reside in the Stone Age, waiting for a creative mind to invent fire.
Exactly. And you know what happened when some guy in a cave rubbed the flint and rock together and all of a sudden caught something on fire. His wife probably said, "You're going to burn the hut down, you knucklehead. Don't ever do that again."
Mm-hmm.
But creativity is often not encouraged, and if we can overcome that fear and recognize the power of creativity, anybody can do it. Don't delegate it off to your marketing department.
No, I wanted across the whole organization.
Exactly. It's it really is a beautiful thing.
Well, and you describe so many benefits. It builds confidence, improves well-being, inspires others, awakens and expands senses, balances an unbalanced world. And you will also go on to say, and I completely agree, it's an essential job skill for the future.
It really is. And I'll give you another example, and I bring these examples in from my own experience in the book. And I got to Columbia Business School, and I had never taken an accounting class. I was a poli-sci undergraduate. I was like, I didn't know accounting. And now I'm in core accounting. I'm looking around. There's KPMG on one side, a guy from Price Waterhouse on the other, and Deloitte. And I'm going, oh, I'm in such trouble. But then they had this thing called case studies. And my first response to a case study is, in the high school, you're an individual performer. And in college, you're an individual performer. You mean my grade's going to depend on these knuckleheads? I don't want that. I want my own control of my own grade. And then I realized, well, wait a minute. One of the guys in my case study is a CPA. Maybe that can help. Well, then the imposter syndrome started to kick in. And I thought, I'm going to drag this group down. I'm embarrassed because I don't know accounting. How can I help them? Well, here's what happened. In the middle of that case study, we were comparing companies and not knowing accounting principles. I knew nothing. I didn't know how to spell GAAP. I literally came up with this idea to compare balance sheets. So basically factoring, put them both at 100%. Let's put them in percentages. Now we can compare company A to company B on a rational basis. And the accountants were like, their original reaction was, well, you can't do that. That's not proper. And then we ended up doing it. We got an A in the class. And the lesson there was that it's that coming together of different skill sets that really makes us successful, and having the courage to be a little creative sometime, even if you're in a technical area, you're not arguably paid to be creative, you can still be creative.
Absolutely. I love that story. And here we are. We're out of time already, Jim. I wanted to talk about your arts for humanity, but we'll do something else with that at some other time. I want to give you a chance just to say, like in 15 seconds, how would you like to close the show?
Well, what I hope we can do, I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, you come back for round 2. Yeah,
absolutely. And I hope people will find that this is a book, if they buy Education is Freedom, that this is a book that they can learn from. I hope it helps individuals in their career, but I also hope anyone that buys this book will give it. It's intended to be a gift book. Give it to somebody who needs that that spark, that inspiration, and hopefully you'll be doing them a favor too. That's why I wrote it, and I hope everyone is able to benefit from me sharing my gift with you.
I know I'm already much better for it, Jim. I thank you so much for doing all the hard work to write it and to get it out into the world and now talk about it. More to come on that for sure. Very glad to know you and have you in your life. Hang with me for just a second. Let me close the show. Listeners and viewers, if you want to learn more about Jim Keys, the various initiatives he pours himself into, or his book, Education is Freedom, you can visit a couple places. One, his personal website is jameswkeys.com. Let me spell that for you. James, JamesWKeyes.com, jameswkeys.com. And then his book website is educationisfreedombook.com. One more time, educationisfreedombook.com. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. We were on air with Finian Kelly talking about his book, Intentionality, a groundbreaking guide to breath, consciousness, and radical self-transformation. He taught us his blueprint to develop intentionality as a way of life, how to understand our human operating system, how to discover how our belief loops code impressions in our lives, and then to recode those impressions for a better outcome. Next week, we'll be on the air with Pam August talking about her book, Potential, how to connect what's already there for exponential impact so you can elevate your mattering in ways that are most important to you. See you there, and remember that work is one of the best adventures and means of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave, so let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.